New year, same old problems? The world isn't just on fire, it's adding fuel. On today's episode of the Infographic Show, we'll show you exactly why 2026 will be the worst year ever. January. Job is nursing his holiday hangover by scrolling through Facebook, and that's when he spots the news. Massive explosion destroys Russian export pipeline. As happened in 2022, pipelines exploded under the Baltic Sea, Russia's multi-billion-dollar gas apparatus to power much of Europe. Moscow blames Western saboteurs. Western officials hint at Russia false flag operations in an attempt to ignite regional conflict. Job spends a few minutes thinking about which could be true and then decides he should just listen to the experts. He switches on the news, where Pentagon-approved commentators with mysterious unnamed sources inside intelligence agencies all repeat the exact same talking points. And then he heads over to YouTube for what promises to be the real truth, or at least that's what the scary thumbnail promised. Instead, he's left with a familiar modern feeling: the world is falling apart and someone somewhere isn't telling us the full story. That lasts for about 2 minutes, right up until he opens the letter from his utility company informing him that his heating bill means it's time to consider black market organ harvesting. With Europe scrambling for energy, the US, under pressure to support NATO allies, reroutes massive shipments of natural gas overseas. Within 48 hours, American heating and electricity prices triple, the fastest surge in US history. It's a windfall for investors and energy companies who celebrated record profits. For ordinary Americans like Job, not so great. And the timing could not be worse. Meteorologists are warning that the long-predicted disruption of the polar vortex has arrived, delivering what will be the coldest January in decades. Millions of Americans, including Job, are already drowning in an affordability crisis. Gas, groceries, everything from eggs and rent are still ridiculously high, despite years of politicians saying life will become affordable again. Surveys last winter showed 1 in 4 Americans couldn't afford to heat their homes, but for people on a low income, it was much higher, a staggering 57%, and that includes Job, whose house is like the inside of an abandoned igloo. Of course, politicians just blame the other party. No relief bill passes, no one takes responsibility, people freeze while they argue. Politicians are useless, thinks Job, but at least the TV screen makes his house feel warmer. Meanwhile, Russia declares the explosion an act of war, accusing the West of economic sabotage intended to prolong the conflict in Ukraine, just as peace talks looked promising. Some people blame Russia, some blame the US. Job just doesn't know which story to trust. He is one of the 72% of Americans who don't trust the media, so who can he trust to tell him the truth? And then things get really bad. NATO holds an emergency summit. Commentators warn that the world is closer to world war than at any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Warmongers have been claiming that 2027 would be the year where Russia and China possibly become the new Axis, but it's looking now like it might be sooner. It's the 1930s repeating. But Job's not entirely certain who the bad guys are. He is pretty sure about one thing though: who will die. He's just glad that he's like most of his former school buddies, overweight and diabetic. His bathroom cabinet is full of medicine for anxiety, depression, and the odd bout of paranoia. But 5 minutes later, after some Googling, he finds an article: Congress moves to reinstall military draft, with the very worrying subheading, Pentagon to lower bar for selection, citing national security concerns. Low bar, thinks Job. Well, that's my territory. All this end-of-the-world stuff is way too stressful, so he watches a TikTok video of a scorpion and a centipede fighting to the death. February. The EU declares that Europe needs a strong European defense posture. All nations must budget to spend big on military procurement to respond to possible Russian aggression. U.S. arms companies beef up production to meet the new demand. The U.S. is divided by isolationists demanding America stay out of European problems, as the other half calls for the obliteration of the authoritarian threat across the seas. As for Job, he just wants a warm house and to be able to afford strawberries again. As possible war takes up newspaper space and airtime on TV, another story, the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, is being pushed to the back pages. The scandal is not going away. Last year, Job read the news stories about Epstein's emails but decided he'd have a look for himself. Since then, anytime Job sees a politician on TV talking, he can't help but wonder if they are lying. And he's not alone. Just 33% of Americans in 2025 believe the government acted in their interests. Now it's even less, driven partly by the newly released and heavily redacted Epstein documents. The growing skepticism of the government threatens to break out into mass riots. The White House promises more files will come in the months ahead. It's too much to take, so Job decides to self-medicate and rip open a bag of Cheetos. March. Job is only 25, but he's already 3 friends down from school. 2 guys and 1 girl who took some counterfeit OxyContin pills and never came back. In 2026, drug overdose deaths in the US are spiraling out of control. In 2025, they were around 90,000, and that was below the peak years of 2021 to 2023, where numbers hovered around 110,000, but still much, much higher than the 1980s and 1990s. Job is thinking this war on drugs, it isn't going too well. Despite high-profile arrests and tens of billions poured into anti-trafficking efforts, demands for drugs in 2026 has never been higher. Job doesn't take hard drugs, but if he did, getting them would be easier than buying a Big Mac. In 2025, the US blew up some drug boats, which made nice headlines, but cartels as usual adapted, opening new routes and embracing innovation. They started funding rogue chemists, offering huge payouts for breakthroughs in synthetic compounds. In 2026, a new substance began flooding American streets, a hyperpotent synthetic opioid only known as Drug X. Nearly undetectable, cheap to manufacture, and hundreds of times stronger than fentanyl, it causes catastrophic respiratory failure within minutes. Narcan doesn't work. Emergency rooms are overwhelmed. The bodies keep piling up. And when one dealer gets arrested, another steps into his shoes. Job watches politicians at press conferences on TV, echoing decades of promises to stamp out the evil that's plaguing American streets. Activists, meanwhile, demand sweeping reform, decriminalization, treatment-first policies, and regulation, but nothing changes. In 2025, 45% of Americans in a Gallup poll said the U.S. was making progress in the war, almost double who thought that in 2023. But in 2026, as the reality hits home, Americans again concede that drugs are here to stay. And at the end of the month, Job gets a phone call. It's about Billy, a guy he washed dishes with at Red Lobster, dead after taking Coke contaminated with Drug X. April. In 2025, Americans were warned that robots were coming for their jobs. It turns out that while tens of thousands of jobs were lost to AI, the workforce didn't collapse. Most people simply adapted, learning to work with AI rather than being replaced by it. Job calls himself a social media marketing maverick. His only real achievement is helping a friend sell a stolen bicycle on Facebook Marketplace, but with AI's help, his resume reads like he is a genius. It's almost entirely fiction, but it looks amazing. Job is not one of the 54% of Americans with 6th grade or less literacy skills, but he's not exactly a genius either. Still, he tells himself, who needs reading and writing when you've got ChatGPT? But it turns out the AI problem is much deeper. In 2026, people are drowning in algorithmically optimized garbage. AI slop designed to hijack attention and keep the dopamine flowing. Job's feeds become an endless swamp of deepfake tornadoes and virtual breasts, microdosed to keep him scrolling. He hated himself for it, but he just couldn't stop. The data told the same story. Millions consuming brain rot content, barely able to focus on more than a couple inches of text, or last 5 seconds into a video without an explosion or some other dopamine hit. And it was already having a catastrophic effect on IQ and critical thinking skills. Since Job started using it for pretty much everything, he has to admit he's starting to feel, well, dumber. The reason is that the more people who relied on AI to write, think, calculate, create, and solve problems, the more the brain stopped flexing its muscles. MRI studies showed underactivated frontal lobes and reduced memory formation. People weren't just getting lazy, they were self-sabotaging their own intelligence. And critics in 2026 started saying the philosopher Aristotle was right. People need to struggle, to be challenged, to explore, in order to flourish as human beings and feel content. AI shortcuts were making Americans not just dumber but unhappier too, in what was fast becoming a nation of prompt inputters. By late 2026, experts issued a warning. We are becoming part drone, half human consumers programmed by algorithms, sleepwalking into a brave new world. And Job? He didn't actually finish the article. A deepfake video of a leopard attacking someone at a market popped up in his feed. May, give it to me straight, Job joked with his doctor after going to see him for dizzy spells. The doctor wasn't kidding, reminding Joe that the US's excess death rates are through the roof, 1.5 million over the last few years. More young Americans than any other time in history are getting heart disease and cancer, the doctor said. Almost 10% of Americans in 2024 to 2025 reported having had cancer in their lives, up from 7% just 15 years earlier. It's the same with heart attacks. Many more people under 40 are having them than in the recent past, in a country where only 11% of people smoke compared to 40% in the 1960s. Job asks the doctor why, and the punchline is no one knows. A major study in 2025 said ultra-processed foods in the US are causing a lot of the damage, but it's more than that. Maybe the fact that so many people report feeling lonely matters, and that includes Job, who's starting to think of the outside like it's a minefield of anxiety-causing IEDs. Life expectancy in the US was already reversing, but in 2026, new studies say it's much worse than previously thought, especially if you live where Job lives. Statistically, he's doomed. Job works freelance online, so like 64 million Americans, he doesn't have health insurance. His lecture from the doctor about high blood pressure and diet just cost him $850. When he gets back home, he reads that the US had the worst health outcomes in the highly developed world, yet spends far more on healthcare than any other country. Those pills that he just bought cost at least 5 times more than in Canada. Job is all for free market economics, but hundreds of bucks for a few pills just feels wrong. June. Job's heart certainly skipped a few more beats in June when he went into the city. The number of homeless in 2025 was about 770,000, but in 2026, with the fuel and housing crisis, the number increased dramatically. So there Job was, minding his own business, when a homeless man calling himself Jesus Christ, lugging tent poles, twisted into a makeshift cross, rushed him in the street and accused him of being one of Satan's demons. He's got nothing against the homeless, but these encampments in his city are out of control. The number of homeless in the US has increased by hundreds of thousands over the last 30 years, and experts say it's only going to get worse. It's a testament to Job that he's still got his own place, but he's already 2 months behind on the rent. He's in the same boat as 12.1 million severely cost-burdened Americans who spend over 50% of their wages on rent. This is a heat wave year too, and tensions are running high in the streets. 2025 was a good year for murder statistics, but not so much in 2026, and Job is pretty sure that a lot of minor street assaults and thefts are not being recorded. July. As police departments all over the US go on strike over low pay and increased risks, people are taking to the streets to protest. Americans are protesting over so many different issues. People are clashing with the wrong activist groups. In 2025, there were more protests than in decades, but in 2026, there were even more. About 3.5% of the population took to the streets. That's a bad look for the US, as half of the world watches the Soccer World Cup and traveling fans point their cameras at the mayhem. Anti-war activists are protesting the major sales of weapons to Europe. Anti-ICE activists are clashing with anti-immigration activists. English soccer fans describe the violence as appalling behavior. Job just stays home. He figures he'll just wait it out and see what happens. But then the cops turn up at his door, telling him his face has been matched with someone at a protest, which had erupted into violence. After a trip to the station, he receives an apology. It was a false positive. It turns out the US authorities are testing a new facial recognition technology bolstered by artificial intelligence that doesn't just match faces, but also will predict where unrest will take place. Justified by so much violence, police departments are using programs developed by Palantir to create minority reports on Americans, predictive policing that tells the police where crimes will happen next. Everyone is a suspect. Job takes out his notebook, the Book of Job, where he lists things to worry about, and next to number 17 he writes, Surveillance State. August. As generative AI exploded in capability, anyone with a half-decent laptop could produce photorealistic deepfake videos. The government had dragged its feet on regulation, partly because the AI arms race with China made lawmakers terrified of slowing innovation. Job thought, well, that won't affect me, so it didn't go in his notebook. Like 1 in 4 American men under 30, Job was lonely. He was also part of the 10% of American men aged 22 to 34 who were still virgins, up from just 4% a decade earlier. He's a nice guy, sure, but even with AI rewriting his dating profile, his bio and his photo combo are not exactly impressing the ladies. He was starting to think that he might die a virgin until he met Deborah, a beautiful, successful 29-year-old surgeon from Australia, and she chose Job out of millions of men. Obviously, he was special. They hit it off instantly, bonding over their love of nature. Not entirely true for Job, but weed grows in nature, so that counts. Within weeks, they upgraded to video chats, personal video chats, at least from Job's side. It seemed like it was just too perfect, and it was. Deborah had a problem. Her money was all tied up and she needed help buying a flight to the US. Job didn't hesitate. He borrowed from his parents, he emptied his savings, maxed out his credit cards, then came visa complications, then a property investment guarantee because she wanted her and Job to settle down, and then another temporary emergency. And by the time it was all over, Job had sent $60,000, most of it borrowed. And then Deborah, or Debs as Job lovingly called her, was gone. Turns out Deborah was actually a Nigerian guy. The FBI told Job this guy was using advanced deepfake software to transform himself on live video from a skinny kid with a shaved head into a Hollywood-level goddess. And then Job got one more message: pay another 10 grand or we'll leak the video of your goods. Job refused, and the Nigerian made good on the threat. Now, Job's friends, parents, co-workers, and several thousand strangers have all seen what Job gets up to when he's home alone, which is pretty much always, especially now. The police tell Job he is not alone. Deepfake crimes have exploded. There were 500,000 deepfake videos produced in 2023, 8 million in 2025, and projections of 150 million by the end of 2026. That means more scams, more blackmail, harassment, misinformation. 2026 is the year truth died, along with Job's dignity. September. As summer turns to fall, Job is unhealthy, broke, in debt, humiliated, scared, lonely, and getting dumber by the minute. He asks ChatGPT what he should do, and it replies, "Do you have a rope?" Pretty rough from a machine that Job might have fallen in love with. Yep, he's one of the millions who've come down with AI psychosis. Could things get any worse? October. Job always thought of himself as a fighter, but truth be told, he is starting to lose hope. He has been searching online and he finds out he's not alone. Around the year 2000, the US started seeing huge increases in deaths of despair, drugs, alcohol, self-harm, which until 2013 primarily affected middle-aged white males without a degree. After 2013, black middle-aged males without a degree started to catch up and peaked in 2022. Activists talked about how over 1 million people, females too, died this way. And that was more Americans than were killed in all of the US's 20th century wars in a matter of just 17 years. But worse, the numbers haven't reversed, and these days they include a lot more young folks like Job. Like many other Gen Zs, Job drinks less than the generations before him, but despair, he has that in spades. He meets almost all the criteria for the most despairing demographic: no degree, low income, isolated, lives in an area of widespread poverty. He doesn't want to become a statistic, one of the increasing numbers of people, mostly men, many poor, who decide they just don't want to live anymore. Unfortunately, those numbers have been climbing higher, breaking records even, and in 2026 it's shaping up to be another record year. Job needs some good news for once. November. Job wakes up to the headline, "America Under Attack." He reads that there was a blackout that began without warning when power grids, banking networks, air traffic systems, and telecommunications failed simultaneously in New York City and California. Subways stopped in the tunnels, emergency services lost communication, and Wall Street trading broke down. Supermarkets were stripped bare within hours, with hordes of people fighting over toilet rolls and Jolly Ranchers. The National Guard was deployed as widespread looting and fires broke out. Federal officials initially blamed a coordinated cyber attack by China or Russia, calling it a digital Pearl Harbor. But analysts later say the catastrophe wasn't caused by a hostile nation, but by an emergent flaw generated inside multiple commercial AI systems, the ones that control supply chain logistics, energy routing, and banking fraud detection. When the algorithms interacted unpredictably, they produced self-modifying code that spread across critical networks and shut down control systems faster than engineers could respond. Experts have called it the side effect of excessive automation. Truth be told, Job has no idea what all that means, but he's pretty sure it's Terminator territory. December. The government releases a massive tranche of the long-sealed Epstein files. The Justice Department held most of it back in Part 1 and 2, and Congress tried to lessen the damage with the black redaction marker pen, but Part 3 is a revelation. Job spends days digging through them. It stuns him how millions of ordinary Americans struggle through poverty, violence, and growing economic inequality, while a circle of elites play God behind closed doors in their grand mansions and summer houses. Epstein's network reached deep into U.S. political power, global finance, intelligence agencies, and foreign governments. The trafficking story, as horrific as it was, seemed almost like a side plot compared to the scale of influence he wielded. The tone of the conversations are what shocked Job the most: a contempt for the public, a belief that people were easily manipulated with spectacle and distraction as Epstein and co. shaped economies, bet on ruined ones, and planned for chaos and war. It causes an earthquake in the entire global power structure. The files reveal strategic deals, covert influence operations, and coordination that blurs the lines between political parties, giant corporations, foreign and domestic intelligence agencies, and the ultra-rich. No one goes to prison, no blackmail videos are released, no major political figures face any charges. But the deep state, long ridiculed as a conspiracy theory, has been partly exposed. The rich and the powerful have been playing by their own rules in a game hidden from the public view. More and more Americans start saying the real conflict wasn't left versus right. It's the public versus a ruling class that was united in self-interest. As for the official story of Epstein's death, polls show 70% of Americans say they didn't believe the official line, including Job. It makes him feel scared and angry. But if anything good comes from the firestorm, it's unity. A national movement rises out almost instantly. No more wars, they shout. No more lies. Get big money out of politics and fix the problems at home. I'll drink to that, Job says to himself as he sits on his front porch and looks out at the wild world in front of him. His phone then interrupted his silence. Notification, new video, infographic show. Why 2027 will be the worst year ever. Oh God, he thinks. Here we go again. Now go check out why you wouldn't survive World War III or click on this video instead.